Hey everybody, it's Dominique with This Girl's Worth. I have a really interesting topic today. I told you guys in my last video that I would be discussing some topics regarding narcissism, and so today we're going to talk about the first one. In my videos of narcissism, I'm always going to come from the lens of someone who went through couples counseling, individual counseling, and also marriage prep counseling. My experience with dealing with the narcissist for 3.5 years, my experience in my family life, immediate family before in relationships dealing with a narcissist, and then also talking about what I'm learning through my own journey as I'm learning to heal and become a better person to deal with my own crap, because whether or not we like it, dealing with the narcissist and becoming the victim of a narcissistic relationship doesn't take away from the fact that we have some internal work that we need to do as well. So in this particular episode, we're going to be talking about differentiation, and we're going to talk about how that can make it hard for you to leave a narcissistic relationship when you have issues with differentiation. So I'm going to be defining two types of differentiation issues. And then I'm also going to be discussing my experience with differentiation and how that led to some codependent traits of mine and why that made it took me 3.5 years to leave a relationship that I knew was doomed from the beginning. So I'm also working right now, so if I do turn away and happen to look at this as I continue to talk, please know I am very focused on our conversation, and I want you to know that I am definitely keeping this as a priority. I just also am working right now, so I can't completely take my attention away from my work, and so that's just what it is. You know, I manage a team, and so it's sometimes people ask me questions or things happen, and so I do want to be mindful. I want to be mindful of that, and so it doesn't seem like I'm fully distracted while doing the video, so I'm multitasking right now. Now, this young lady reached out to me on social media, and I'll be doing a separate video talking specifically about this, but she asked, how do you set boundaries with a narcissist? Like, she was like, if you know, I've been in a relationship for 20 plus years with a narcissist, and I just feel like I don't know how to leave, even though I'm the one who's the breadwinner of the family and I take care of everything. And when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's important to keep in mind that narcissists are difficult personality types. They're cluster B personalities. Cluster B, they're in the same category as dealing with a psychopath and a sociopath. So when you really put it in context like that, when you're thinking about like, what's the personality traits? When you're dealing with a narcissist, you're not dealing with a person who thinks and functions normally. There's something there that has affected their ability to connect with human beings. And so most relationships have some reciprocal aspect to it. They have a relationship, there's an aspect of give and take. Like, even if this relationship is bad, like, you're getting something from it. When you're dealing with a narcissist, the relationship in general is just draining. And a lot of us, we know the relationship is bad and dysfunctional from the beginning, but we can't quite figure out how we got caught up in it. And so we're like, how did I, you know, I'm the breadwinner, I'm the smart one, I've worked hard on myself, I'm not a perfect person, but I know I'm not crazy, and like, how did I end up in this situation? It's my firm belief that everybody who gets caught dealing with a narcissist has issues with differentiation. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, you're codependent, or you just, you know, and codependent, a lot of people have misconceptions on codependency, so we'll talk about that. Codependency and narcissism are actually, what's weird, people say they're the opposite. How I describe codependency and narcissism is a codependent person and a narcissist have the same life experiences, okay? They've been traumatized and hurt in the same way, but one person has internalized that pain and the other person has externalized that pain. So we'll talk about that, and that's the next video. We're going to talk about codependency there from my perspective. I'm not going to be giving you a full-on psychoanalytical talk about it. It's going to be my own experience with codependency, because I struggle with codependency, and I'm still breaking off some of those things of codependency. Codependency is not a death sentence. It can change. You can learn those behaviors and be like, holy crap, this was not what I should have been. This is like, there's something wrong with the way that I'm functioning, and change it. We all have an ability as human beings to change. But it's my firm belief that people who are dealing with narcissists have core issues with differentiation from the get-go, and then get into a relationship with a narcissist. And by virtue, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, that relationship is going to be codependent. There is no other way to have a relationship with a narcissist. You cannot say, oh, I have a full-on relationship with a narcissist, I'm 100% invested and connected, but I don't have any codependency and they don't have any codependency. Narcissists, by virtue, groom every single person that they're dating to be codependent. Every single one of you. So if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you have developed some codependent traits, and you have developed some issues with differentiation much deeper than you probably already had coming into the relationship. Now, me, I didn't recognize, I was first of all 20 years old when I met the narcissist that I was dating. At 20 years old, I mean, I'm 25 now, so it's not like it's not like I can say, oh, I'm so much smarter than I was at first, but being 25, I'm like, oh, I feel like I don't know anything now, and I'm like, I definitely didn't know anything about myself at 20 years old. I am a completely different person than I was when I was 20. Completely and totally. This is why they say the brain is still developing, and there's a lot of evidence to show it, because you're not the same person. You're not going to be the same person you were as a teenager. You're not going to be the same person you were in your early 20s. And when I'm 30, I hope to God that I look back and I'm like, oh, I'm not the same person as I am now. I only hope to grow, improve, and learn. I didn't know I had issues with differentiation. I didn't know that I had codependency traits. I didn't know that. I always thought of myself to be very strong and independent, and I've worked very hard to be where I am. I've always supported myself. I've always been a very independent-minded person, but I didn't know when it came to romantic relationships and interpersonal relationships that I had this issue with codependency and differentiation. So we're going to get into it. What is differentiation? There are two types. So I'm just going to go, there's so many different articles regarding this, but I'm just going to highlight two of them, because I don't feel like it'll do you justice to highlight every single one of them. But the two main ones that I'm going to talk about are intrapsychic differentiation and interpersonal differentiation. Narcissists, like I said, you have a codependent relationship when you're dealing with a narcissist, which means that when you're dealing with codependency, just at the very shell of it, something in your childhood, something in some formative year of yours, it doesn't necessarily have to be your childhood, it could be your teenage years, it could be your early adulthood, something in your very formative early years taught you that you need to work harder to receive love. Like, there's not something on the inside of you that says, I am worthy all by myself, I am amazing all by myself, I deserve love all by myself. I don't need to prove that I am good, I don't need to prove that I'm worthy, I don't need to prove that I'm valid. Something inside of you is missing in that. And sometimes you don't know until push comes to shove and you're like, oh my God, it's missing. Sometimes you feel like you're okay. Growing up, I knew that I was deeply insecure. I also knew that I had self-esteem issues. Part of it was because most of it has been because I was bullied as a child. So I always grew up thinking I was ugly, hideous, and fat. And so growing up, that deep insecurity led me to be extremely self-conscious. Now, I didn't think that it would affect my romantic relationships because I was working on it and I was better by the time I got to a romantic relationship, but I'm nowhere near the confidence level that I have now. That is what made me extremely vulnerable and susceptible to being in relationships where I felt like I had to prove my goodness and my worth. Didn't recognize I was doing that, but that's exactly what was happening. So as I got older and I went through couples counseling, and my therapist said something to me. She said, she was like, you have a difficulty distinguishing your thoughts and your emotions. And I was like, no, I don't. I know what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. I know the difference. But as I began to talk, the moment she said it, it clicked. Like, actually, I do have this issue. That's a problem with differentiation, especially what they call intrapsychic differentiation, when you can't tell apart your thoughts and your emotions. Why is that such a bad thing? Because that means that your internal voice is all messed up on the inside. Usually there's a difference between the way you think and you feel. There's a complete difference, because what you think is logical thought process. And logic, I'm going to talk to you guys about that in just a second. Logic is not always a good thing. Emotions is what you're feeling at your core. That's your intuition. So if I can't tell the difference between what I'm making up in my head, which is logic, what I have reasoned to make sense, and what I'm feeling, I'm in big trouble. Because that means that something could be off, but if I rationalize it in my head that it makes sense, I'm going to put myself through things that don't make any sense for me. So you see how this is kind of wrapping up and coming together when it comes to the narcissist? Intrapsychic differentiation is when you can't tell apart your thoughts and your emotions. Why is that so important? And this definition I'm getting, if you're wondering, it's from goodtherapy.org. There's also some on, there's also one on PsychAlive. I like PsychAlive. I read that one quite a bit. But, I'll talk about in a minute, how you have a wounded sense of differentiation. But that's the first thing. So when I recognized I was in couples counseling trying to explain my feelings about how my ex hurt me, I couldn't even differentiate between what I was thinking and feeling. Part of that came from the narcissistic abuse that I was experiencing, but it also came from that part of me as a child that didn't invalidate my own internal voice. So that's the first one. On the next hand, you have interpersonal differentiation. So I'm going to read this definition here. It says, interpersonal differentiation is when we can distinguish our distinguish our experience from the experience of people we are connected to. Okay, so you have intrapsychic differentiation. That's when you can tell the difference between your emotions and thoughts. If you can't, you have issues with differentiation. Then on the other hand, you have interpersonal differentiation. That's when you can distinguish the difference between your experience of yourself and someone else. So if you can't distinguish the difference between your thoughts and your emotions, and you can't distinguish the difference between your experience and someone else's experience, what does that create the perfect formula for? Codependency. Now, like I said, codependency comes from a wounded sense of self as a child. It's when you don't validate that internal voice that you are worthy, that you are good enough all by yourself, that you are good. So you feel like you need to prove it. And the way that you go about proving it sometimes is by rationalizing other people's poor behavior of you. And so codependency can look like, this person hurt me, and I don't know why they hurt me. What's wrong with me? Am I not good enough? That's codependent thinking. So if you can't tell the difference between your thoughts and your emotions, you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference between your experience and somebody else's. What does that mean that you do? That puts this perfect formula for codependency, because not only do you assume the burdens of other people, you assume the burdens of other people. You assume their problems, their mistakes, their deficiencies. You assume other people's burdens and problems and mistakes, which means you're an enabler, and you rationalize it. Hopefully this is starting to come full circle for you, because some people are like, I don't understand why, I don't understand how I ended up getting caught up with the narcissist. Differentiation. Differentiation is that internal voice on the inside of you that says, I am my own person, I am my own body, I validate myself. I validate myself. So that means when anything comes against it, there's a protective wall that pops up that's like, hold up, no, that's you and this is me. When you don't have differentiation, you do things like you make excuses for people, you enable them. I know lots of people who are dealing with narcissists. Narcissists are very notorious for having addictions. And they say, you know what, I don't want to supply his addiction, but if he doesn't, the weight of the feeling of how he's going to respond if I don't enable his addiction just tears me up on the inside. That is an issue with differentiation. That's a codependency issue. You are now so embedded in the experience of that narcissist or that addict that you don't even feel like you have the right to be like, I don't care what suffering you have behind your addiction, I'm not supplying your addiction. I'm not enabling that because I don't believe in that. When you don't have the differentiation thing, when you don't have it clearly down, when you can't tell the difference between your thoughts and your emotions, when you cannot tell the difference between your experience and somebody else's experience. If somebody else is sad, you take the burden. If someone else is going through something, you take the burden. You're constantly fixing for people all the time. You're going to stay in a narcissistic relationship. You're going to stay and you're going to wake up 20 years from now like, how did I end up in this narcissistic relationship? Because you don't have a solid core of differentiation. Now, how do you not have a strong core of differentiation? I think I spoke to a little bit earlier when I talked about codependency. Differentiation is that internal voice. More than likely, if you have issues with differentiation, and sometimes it's on purpose and sometimes it's not. More than likely, and especially in the Black community where it's not very prevalent to talk about your emotions and to validate emotions, you probably dealt with parents who were emotionally neglectful or emotionally abusive. That's just the core of it. So when that happens, when you have parents who have raised you in guilt or shame, or they were angry in the way they dealt with you, or they dealt with you like you were a burden, or they mistreated you, or they weren't emotionally available for you, or you went through things and you told them secret things that were horrible that happened to you, and their response was kind of like indifferent. When your parents did not advocate for you properly as a protector, when your parents did not listen to you, when your parents didn't validate you, when your parents didn't allow you to make your own decisions, they coddled you in certain ways that stunted your growth, you develop a messed up sense of self and internal voice. I can guarantee you, if you have differentiation issues, you also probably are extremely critical of yourself as an adult. You probably talk about yourself in a way that is very demeaning to yourself. You beat yourself up. More than likely, you have issues forgiving yourself. You struggle with guilt. You struggle with shame. And so that negative cycle that you're in of, I don't even know the difference between what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. If I love somebody, their experience is my experience. You're connected like this. And so when you get a strong sense of differentiation, you start to go like this. There's a difference. This is healthy because it says, I'm an individual, you're an individual. We're connected. I love you, but I'm also my own person. When you have differentiation issues like this, so it's like, I don't know what's your issue and what's my issue. You're struggling with something, I'm struggling with something. I'm having a bad day, you're having a bad day. We're in an argument, you're mad, I'm mad. That kind of emotional immaturity is going to always leave you in a tangled web because you're caught up in everybody else's mess. When you're like this, and sometimes you might be like this, but when you're like this, you're able to have full relationships with people, and you're like, I'm a full person, this person's a full person. You're not a full person like this. You're a half of a person. You're an extension of somebody else. That's interpersonal differentiation. This is interpersonal differentiation. I understand that you're my husband and you're having a bad experience, and I am there for you. I am right here with you. But if you're angry, it doesn't mean I'm angry. If you're upset, it doesn't mean I'm upset. If you're mad and if you're mad and you decide to blow up on somebody, I'm not mad and blowing up on people too. I'm still my own person. I still have my own core of validation. I still have my own experiences, but I'm there to support you. When you're like this is your experiences are my experiences. You're having a bad day, we're having a bad day. We're having we're down on our luck, we're bad, and we're down on our luck. That it's this interweaving of emotions and thoughts and experiences with another person. You're your own person. And when you don't have that core sense of self, you get caught up in narcissistic relationships. Now let me speak to intrapsychic differentiation. When you can't tell the difference between your thoughts and emotions, because I think for most of us, that's the biggest one. Some of us are able to say, hey, well, okay, sometimes I do take accountability and I enable. And when I don't, and because I'm assuming the burden of everybody else, I am enabling. Some of you are saying, well, I don't necessarily do that, but the difference between your thoughts and their emotions. Now, this intrapsychic differentiation that you struggle with, why is it such a problem? Because, and probably both of them are bad, but the biggest of the two, it's easier to stop interpersonal differentiation issues. It's easier to stop that because you can start to set boundaries. And you can start to set boundaries and say, no, I'm not taking the burden of your experience. I'm not enabling you anymore. I'm not dealing with this. It's way harder for you to change the way that your brain thinks. That's harder. That's harder. It's easier to stop doing something than stop thinking something. I don't know if you guys have ever recognized that, but it is. So intrapsychic differentiation is much more difficult because when you're not able to say, like, this is what I'm feeling versus this is what I'm thinking. Now, I said I was going to get to logic. I'm going to get to logic. Logic is not a bad thing. A lot of people like to say, I'm a logical person. I'm a logical person. I'm not an emotional person. I'm a logical person. And that's not a bad thing. You want to have logic and emotion. They both serve a purpose. But what makes it so difficult is that logic, and this is the thing about logic I had to recognize, logic can be a really bad thing because logic just means rationalization. It means what makes sense. What makes sense. You can make anything make sense. You can make anything sound logical, but you can't make somebody feel something. I can't walk up to a person and say, be angry now. I can't do it. But I can explain my way and weasel my way into something that might make them think something, and then that might bring on some feelings. Or it might make them feel something, which might bring on a particular thought process. Your thoughts and your feelings are not necessarily separate, but the issue lies in the fact when you don't know how to separate the two, and you're not able to say, I think that I don't have the energy right now, but what I'm feeling is that I'm really tired. Your emotions are not logical. Your emotions are not a full-on thought process. When you're speaking of your feelings like it's a thought process. For example, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, your ex cheats on you or your partner cheats on you. You're hurt. That's your feeling. I'm hurt about this. I'm mad. I'm angry. But your thought process is, I love them. So if someone were to ask you, how do you feel about being cheated on? You're saying, I love them. I love them. I feel like I love you. Feel like you love them. I feel like I love you is not a response. I feel like I need space is that's not a feeling. I feel that I think I need space. That's a thought process. I feel hurt. I feel like I don't want to be around you. I want space from you. I want space from you. differentiating and I'm trying to explain this in the best way possible and make it clear. Separating your feelings and your thought process are so important, because if you don't, for example, you can recognize I'm angry. And the best example just popped up in my head right now. You can recognize I'm angry, but let me think through this and how am I going to respond to this? When you don't understand your feelings and your thought process, you're going to react to your feelings and call it a thought process. And if you honor your feelings and you validate that feeling, and then you think about what makes sense and how to honor those feelings, it's a much clearer thought process. Let me give you an example of not being able to differentiate your thought process and your feelings. When I was in that relationship, sometimes my ex-boyfriend would be emotionally unavailable. So there's so many examples that popped up. I was like, I don't even know which one to use. He wouldn't validate my emotional feelings. So it would cause an argument, right? Because I would feel hurt and I would try to express that to him in a logical manner. But I was responding based off of how I felt, because logically I would reason and I would recognize this person doesn't have the capacity to emotionally empathize with me. So what am I expecting from them by asking them to emotionally empathize with me? So I remember going into a counseling session and I tried to talk about this, and I said, and my counselor asked, what are you feeling? Right? And my feelings were, I was hurt and I was angry and I was disappointed. And my response was, I don't know, I feel like we should break up because every time I try to express my emotions to him, he just doesn't meet me with empathy. And she said, okay, what are you feeling? I said, that is what I'm feeling. I feel like we need to break up. She was like, that's not a feeling, that's a thought. And then I thought, what am I feeling? I was like, I guess I'm hurt. I guess I'm frustrated. Some of you communicate in the same way, where your thoughts and your emotions seem like the same exact thing. So when someone asks you, what are you feeling? You're talking about what you're thinking. You're not even talking about what you're feeling. What I'm thinking is we should break up. But breaking up is not a feeling. That's not a feeling. So that's one example that I can give you about issues with differentiation, intrapsychic differentiation. On the other hand, let me give you another example about cheating, and I'll go back. For example, I found out that there were some things in the relationship that my ex did early on that I was not comfortable with that would be classified as cheating. When I found out that this happened in the relationship and my ex was cheating, differentiation, and this is the issue with not being able to think and to feel properly. Because I had differentiation issues, when he cheated on me, instead of actually going and honoring with what I felt about the issue, and my thought process is how I interpreted my feelings. Like, maybe he was, maybe I tried to understand him. Maybe, I don't know why he did this, but maybe he was feeling this. Or so it was like, well, I know that you're hurt about it, but at the same time, he did apologize, and I thought that those were my feelings. I didn't even think like, this is my thought process. So my feelings, I'm still angry. I still have yet to forgive. I still don't feel comfortable about what happened. I still am not comfortable about what happened. I didn't recognize that I was putting the two together. They were like this. So what did that mean? That I rationalized why I should continue to stay in a relationship with a boyfriend, a new boyfriend, by the way, who barely in a relationship with him, had cheated on me. Now, if I would have honored my emotions and honored my thought process would have been thinking through all that stuff and being like, does it make sense to break up? Do you still care about him? Do you want to be with him? But my emotions would have stayed clear. My emotions would have been like, I'm still upset. I'm still angry. I'm still frustrated. When it comes to relationships and thinking about interpersonal relationships, your feelings, your thought process needs to honor your feelings. When you don't separate the two, you're not able to do that. You don't know how to honor the difference between the two. That's why most of you are in narcissistic relationships, because you can't even feel straight and you can't think straight. So you're just like, I don't know what I feel. I mean, I guess I feel disappointed. I mean, I guess I feel, if someone asks you how you feel, you'll talk about your thought process. How are you feeling right now? I'm upset and he needs to leave and get out the house and we need to break up and we're not together anymore and I'm over this and I've been going through this for 30 years. That's not a feeling, that's a thought process. That's a thought process. What are you feeling? I'm feeling disappointed. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling fed up. I'm feeling apathetic. I'm feeling indifferent. when you don't know the difference, it causes two problems. One, you don't know how to honor yourself and your own feelings. And two, you make excuses for other people's behavior because you don't honor what you're even feeling about their behavior. Your thought process is geared towards trying to understand the person. What it does is it puts you in a position where you're constantly rationalizing other people's behaviors. I hope I made that clear and I have nailed it in at this point, that intrapsychic differentiation is literally a reworking of a thought process. Interpersonal differentiation is about setting boundaries. So if you're struggling with any of those two, if you're like, that sounds like me, I don't even know how to separate the two now. They're just all one thing because of how frustrated I am, or they're just all one thing, or yes, I have rationalized my ex-boyfriend or my husband's or my boyfriend's behavior for so long that I don't even know how to see the difference, or, yes, our feelings do feel the same. I support his addictions. I support his dreams. I let him live here, all because I just don't even know how to think straight about this anymore. Take a deep breath. Recognize that this is an issue with who you are at your core. And what really needs to change first is you need to honor your feelings. You need to honor what the heck you're even feeling regarding the situation. Because if your ex is making you feel these types of way, and I call it ex, but some of it's not your ex, some of you are still dealing with that person. You're still dating them. You're still in a relationship with them. You're still living with them, whatever it is. When you're still dealing with these issues from this person, it's very difficult to separate yourself from them, especially because narcissistic relationships encourage a codependency. So it has encouraged you to forsake yourself to make that relationship work or to keep that relationship around. But what I want to encourage you is that first, recognize that this is an issue with differentiation. This is an issue with who you are at your core and separating yourself from these experiences, separating your thought process and your emotions, and being able to stand as a person all on your own. I know it hurts because some people like to think of themselves as completely independent. Some of us like to think of ourselves as we are I don't need other people. I don't need other things. I don't get validated by other people. But at your very core, you got to ask yourself and be honest. You sure did put up with a whole lot. You sure did sacrifice yourself for a whole lot for just a little bit in return. You sure did forgive a lot of things. And if you're asking yourself and you're truthful, you don't even necessarily know how you feel about some of the things that you went through. You don't even know how you feel about it. So when you're trying to ask yourself whether or not you're going to leave this relationship, every emotion pops up in the book. And you rationalize why you did what you did. You rationalize why you stood up for them for so long. You rationalize why you did certain things. And there's no judgment here. But I just want to say that I encourage you to look up differentiation on your own. Look up and see if those are some of the issues that you're experiencing. And tell me if that's what you experienced as a child. Did you experience a parent who's emotionally neglectful? Did you experience a parent who wasn't supportive and protective enough? Do you have a messed up internal voice? Do you have a messed up voice on the inside that's just constantly beating you up, telling you you're not good enough, making you feel like you need to prove and earn love? Because if you do, that's the core of your problem there. Once you learn how to validate your own feelings, once you learn how to have the internal system working, you're going to reject everything about that narcissist, because you're going to be like, there is no way I'm going to sit up and put up with that crap. You're going to begin to validate that internal part, and it's going to start reflecting on the outside. You're going to say, this is what I'm feeling, and this is what I'm going to do about these feelings. This is my feeling, and here's the thought process. You're going to be able to separate the two. So no longer when someone's asking you, what are you feeling, you talk about what you're thinking. No longer when someone tells you, when you talk about what he did, but he does this, and I just feel like I can't tell him no. You're going to say, I can tell him no, because it doesn't honor me, and I'm not about to sit there and allow him to just use me, abuse me, take from me like I'm a store. I'm not a store, So think about it this way. Really, really research differentiation, and let me know if you have any questions about it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for my next video where I'm going to talk a little bit more about codependency in narcissistic relationships. Hope that you have an amazing day, and I'll talk with you soon. Bye.